Black Gemara. Today's daf is daf daf mem. And just to bring you up to date, we began with a pasuk, and like we did it once before already with Rava, we're doing this again here tonight. Every word in that pasuk is meduyak. So we have in Vayikra first. Took out a chumash to make sure I get it all right because there's so many psukim here. So we have in Chumash Vayikra first we discuss a par koyin Mashiach. We're talking about people who did an aveda, and they thought that apidin is mutter. So the Torah starts off, if people did an aveda, and the first example the Torah gives is a par koyin Mashiach. Then you do a par helam dovish or tzibur from the whole community, and then the par nasi. The par koyin Mashiach we're talking about. He thought that you're allowed to do what he's doing, and he went ahead b'shegi again. He did it. So he brings a par, a carbon, a par. And this par is unique that they sprayed 7 times in the Heichel against the Paroiches. It fell on the ground. If it fell on the Paroiches, all right, but toward the direction of the Paroiches. And then they sprayed 4 times on the inner Mizbech. So this is called Matan Shiva and is Matan Arba. And then the leftover blood and the fats, you put it on Mizbech Ha'oila, you put it on the outside Mizbech, and then the rest of the animal is burnt outside, the Sraf. That's the par koyin Mashiach. The par helim dover shel tzibur, where the entire community relied on a bezin. They made a mistake. The exact same modus operandi. The exact same modus operandi. So you do the same thing. You spray against the pareiches. You do 4 on the mizbeach, the blood and the fats on the outer mizbeach, and the rest of the animal is burnt outside. Similarly, you have the par yom kippurim. The par yom kippurim is the same thing, but par yom kippurim has an additional thing. And the Seir Yom Kippurim has an additional thing, and that is the Gota Yom Kippur, the Sila Chatas. And the par, what is different is that you also sprayed inside the Kodesh HaKadoshim. Opposite the Bein HaBadim, opposite the other, and you sprayed inside on Yom Kippur. On Yom Kippur, in addition to the inner Mizbech, in other words, they had the same avodas like the par of Kohen Mashiach and the par Helm Doja Tzibur, but you had an additional avodah inside the Kodesh HaKadoshim. You sprayed sometimes towards the Aron, between Bein Habadim. The same thing with the Seir. Okay? So that's what you have. And something similar is similar in the sense that you burn it outside is a Par Aduma. So now the Gemara is learning the following. We brought a Braisa here. Where are we? So we brought a Braisa and Daflamatesam and Alpha. Just remind me the Braisa says, because that's going to be the whole Gemara. We took a passage where it says regarding Par Helam Dovish Tzibur. After the Torah delineates exactly what to do, and yet the Torah says, it says in the Torah, but also la par, you should do to this par, kasher also la par, or kasher also, like you did it to the other one. Which other one are you talking about? We're talking about the par of Kohen Mashiach, which is written right before. So first the Torah says the par of the Kohen Mashiach, the anointed Kohen who made an Avera, and the next one is par Helam Dovish Tzibur, the entire community made an Avera. And the Torah is telling you should do to the second par, just like you did to Kohen Mashiach. And the Gemara wants to know, it's already spelled out exactly what to do by the Helen Dovish Tzibur. What do you have to compare it? What are you adding by comparing it to the Par Mashiach? So that's what we learn that we're going to say that it's totally extra. Yeah, what do you need it for? So we decide, you know what? We're not comparing it to Par Mashiach at all. We're comparing it to itself. What are we comparing it to itself? That we're repeating whatever I told you should do. I'm telling you again, do it. And what do we gain by repeating it? Because we know that when it comes to kachim, shana olav akasal akir, by repeating it, it now becomes li'ikuva. If you don't do it, you're not yaitza. That is how we know. We learned how we get to all this, because that's how we know that those the evid. If you didn't spray all 4 matanas on the outer mizbech or chatas, you only did 1 according to Beis Hillel, that's all right. But the inner mizbech, but the evid, you missed out any of the activities matanas. It's possible. How do we know? Because the Torah repeats itself by par helam dover shel tzibur, which is done on the inner mizbech. And how do you know par helam dover shel likuva? Because it says it twice. Would it say twice? Because it says v'asal apar. It says v'asal apar kasher asa. This is it. Okay, so I think now let's go through Gemara. The Gemara is going to go through every single aspect of the Brisa, because then we learn out. We introduce then lapara. When lapara is extra, teaches you another carbon, parikapudim, and then hachatas teaches you another thing. Every one of them teaches you something else. So now we go through the whole thing. So we're up to 4 lines from the top. We asked first of all, what's Matan Shiva? You said the Brisa said that Matan Shiva is repeated, and how do you know that we okay? The Brisa said also kasher also to tell you that if anything is missing of the Matan Shiva. then you know you're not Yaitse. Then we said, what about the Matan Arba? So it says then Kenyasa. Again, it says Kenyasa. So we broke up the Matan Sheva, the Matan Arba. So the first thing we wanted to do is raise it yesterday. Where do you have why is Matan Sheva different than Matan Arba? Because Matan Sheva nowhere does it work if it's missing. Matan Arba and the outside kabbanas, if you don't do all of it, maybe it's good enough. That's why we need a special another limit to teach you regarding in the Mizbech. So we asked, where do you find Matan Sheva? B'chlal anywhere else? So we said the Paraduma, and there it says Chukah. So it's Chukas HaTorah. And the same thing by the Goyim, it says there Tiyah, which means this is how it has to be. Says the Gemara, okay, we're up to the Gemara here, 4 lines to the top of the page. Sorry, 3 lines. Matan Arba Menayin. So how do you know? You said in the B'rayah. So how do you know the Matan Arba also if you didn't do all 4 in the Inner Mizbech? You're not doing it. Tamalai Mekain Yasa. It says again. It says Va'asola Par Kasher also. That's one repetitive. That's regarding the Matan Sheva, the 7. And then it says Kain Yasa. That's how you should do it. It's again repetitive. Is what to teach you that even the Matan Dal as well. So Gemara wants to know now, why would you think they're different? So Gemara says, Ma'ishna Matan Zayin. Why Matan Zayin do we say that it's Ma'akiv? The Chesiv and the Kfilim. It says V'asol Lapar. You should do everything. It says, and then it says Kasher Asa. In other words, everything that I told you to do, make sure you do it like the way I told you to do. So everything I told you to do, includes also the spraying of the 4 Kranas. What do you need? Why would you limit the pasuk only to the 7 and not to the 4? When the pasuk says, "Do everything that I told you to do," why do you have to have a kenyas afterwards? That's the most question. We're going to give 2 answers. Says the Gemara, the same, but also lapar kasher also includes all the activities, including the matan dalet. Amar Rabim said, "You're right." We said that Kain Yas Loy is another time extra, another repetitive, and we need it for the Matan Dalet that only follows the view of Rab Shimon. Why? Because the view of Rab Shimon is going to be that we don't learn to spray all 4 times in Par Helam Dover. We need another limud from Par Kay Mashiach, because he'll tell us, give an introduction, he'll something more. He says that it only says 2 kronos. It says only kronos or karnos. That's 2. It says karnos by Parka Mashiach 2. We put the 2 together, it becomes 4. So it's not a doubling up because it never said in the first place. So therefore, according to him, he can't learn. But also, kasher also that you learn from there. But also part, also part kasher also. You can't learn. That's a double regarding matan dalad. That's why you need kenyasa for the matan dalad. No, according to Chamitaka, we have a problem. So what does he do with the kenyasa? That's what I was going to ask in a minute. This whole Braise follows Rab Shimon, and for him, there's no doubling up when it comes to the 4 kronos. Why? The time of L'mayla we learned, he says L'mayla Mashiach. It says it could have said Keren that you should spray on the corner. It says V'nosna Koyin Min Adam Al Karnas Hamizbech. It could have said Keren. It says Karnos plural Shtaim. It says 2 Shtaim. All I know is that when it comes to the Par Kay Mashiach, how many corners do you have to spray the blood on? 2. Lamato by the next parsha, which is Par Helm David Tzibur. Over there it says Keren. Oh, same thing. Kar Nois. It could have said Keren, the corner, which means all the corner, whatever. By not saying Kar Nois Zavka 2, it's 2. Arba, Divrei Rab Shimon, and you have to put the 2 together to 4. Even though in Kar Nois Rashi says in Kar Nois by Par Helm David Tzibur is written without above, must be that he holds Yesh Aim Lemikra, and then his long traces over there talks about Yesh Aim Lemikra. He holds that traces of discussion there where Rab Shimon actually holds that up, but that's Rashi. So according to Rab Shimon, you don't have a doubling up. Rabbi disagrees. He says, no. We know 4 by each one. There is a doubling up here, and therefore I learn, and therefore Itaka is included in Asag and Yasa. What's he going to do with Ken Yasa then? We'll soon see. Why is it doubling? How does he learn 4? It says that's Karnos. He said because it says in Pasuk then Hariyim. It says Oil Moed. It says in the Pasuk you should place the blood on the Mizbeach. Teiris Hasam Lifnei Hashem. Asher ba'il moed, and the Mizbeach Asher oil moed. The moment you told the Teiris Hasamim, we know exactly which Mizbeach we're talking about. What does it say ba'il moed? I'll call on a ba'il moed, telling you that everything that is done oil moed, the keren is you should do that in oil moed because it's extra. That you have to do it on all the corners in oil moed. Otherwise, why would it say that? Rabbi Yehuda, that's so. So ask the Gemara, okay, so he learns from Oil that all the activities of Oil have to be, the entire Oil has to be covered, all 4 corners. So Rabbi Yehuda can't ask my what's he do with extra with Kenyasi? He doesn't need it for doubling up already. It's included in the first also that doubling up, because he holds it all the same. Matan Dala, Matan Sheva. The boy, he needs a Gitani Bila Braisa, the fish, or the Madal Pay, the Smicha, Vishiyadam. Yom Kippur doesn't mention there that you have to place your hands on the thing, and it doesn't tell you to do what to do with the leftover blood after you finish spraying on the four corners. What do you do with it? So normally we say you throw it down to your side, but there it doesn't say. How do you know? Menayin, Talmud Leimed. That's why it says in the pasuk, Kain Yasa, that you should do Kain Yasa, and that is coming to teach you regarding the Par Yom Kippurim. Says the Gemara. So that's what he does with it. So you want to understand, you just said before that you said before that it says, okay, let's go back to the pasuk. Every word in the pasuk is extra. So we go back to the beginning of the pasuk where it says, "V'osel lapar." It says you should do to the par, kasha osel lapar chatas. You have a few extra paras here. Because we're talking about the par. The Torah said, bring a par. So what did it say, "V'osel lapar"? Just say, "V'osel." And then the next part, kashas laparcha, just say kashas lachatas. Or so we learn other kabbalas. We're introducing other kabbalas, and you're telling me that lapar is teaching you. Well, lapar, you said about lapar goes to Yom Kippurim. So and what are you learning in Kippur from the Helm Dover, Pad Helm Dover Tibur? You're learning that you have to do smicha and shir adam. What do you need the Kenyas to tell you the same thing? You're telling me the Kenyasa and the pasuk is actually teach you about Par Yom Kippurim. You should do smicha and shir adam yisayt. We know they're ready from the beginning of the pasuk. That word lapar. Says the Gemara, lapar. You said lapar. Sorry, lamad. Never told us about Par Yom Kippur what we should do, and therefore we look at Yasa. For the Gemara, you told us lapar Yom Kippurim. You told us lapar is for Yom Kippur. What I need lapar and Kenyasa. Sometimes I would have thought that Hani Mili, I would have thought when we say that we compare the Avodah Yom Kippur, Par Yom Kippur to Par Helm Dov Tibur, is only Avodah the Ma'akva Kapara. Now what? Things which are ma'akiv the kapara, to tell you that if you don't do it, you're not yaitza. We all know that smicha. If you don't do smicha, the carbon is still a good carbon. If you don't pour the rest of the blood down, if the blood spilled out, we have no leftover blood. You're still ma'akiv the kapara. Maybe taka doesn't. You don't have to do it in the first place by Yom Kippur because we have no limit for it. A malay kamashal. If we need another word, yasa tell you that what? In addition to the things which are ma'akiv kapara, which you learn from lapar, learn from the word kenyasa that even things which are not ma'akiv, you have to do it by the Par Yom Kippur. And how do you know? From Pad Helm Dov Tibur. No, so Rav Shimon, what does he do with the word El Moed? He said that you need to learn only two written here and two written there, but it says El Moed, it's an extra word El Moed. Obviously, tell you that you have to cover the entire El Moed, all four corners. He says, no, I learned different Rosh from there altogether. The boilish even nifchas atika shel hechel you know what comes to teach you? If the ceiling caved in on the Kodesh HaKadoshim, they wouldn't sprinkle because it has to be like a tent. It has to have a cover. That's what I use it for. Totally different. Vidach, and the other one, so you're using oil might teach you have to do all four corners. What do you do with what is this drasha that you need a ticker on it? And see, like everybody agrees. And for the Gemara, Asher, it says Asher oil might, which is oil might. Say Asher, extra word to tell you both didn't. Vidach, Rav Shimon Asher loydorish. Abaya comes along and says, you, Rabbi Yirmiyah, says that this whole the pasuk over here, this Baraisa is talking about according to Rabbi Shimon. That's why you say that I needed I'm breaking up Matan Zayim and Matan Dalud. I need a separate limit. Tell you a doubling up, so you'd be at Makiv. That's what you said. I'll give you another answer. It goes even according to Chachamim. Amar Rabbi Yehuda Namit. It will work out even according to Rabbi Yehuda. Novas. I would have thought that mide dahave asmicha v'sheradam. Let me give an example. Let's say it's included when it repeats. It says all the matanos include the matan zayin, matan dal. But I would have thought all the activities are doubled up, right? Including the activity of a smicha, including the dibur sheradam. It's all double up. It says twice in the pasuk. And yet, what's it in by pad helam dovish tibur if he didn't do smicha? Pad Helen Dovish, if he didn't throw down the blood down the chute, it's still a good carbon. So even though it was doubled up, not everything that was doubled up is ma'akiv. So I would have thought, what's ma'akiv? Only there's something which is unique. The matan zayin is unique, so maybe that's what's ma'akiv. But matan dal is not unique. You have it in other places as well. So just like she'adam is not not ma'akiv, even though it's doubled up. Maybe also here. That's why I need a special pasuk that tell you that the matan dal also is ma'akiv. That's what I thought. That's what comes to tell you that no, it is ma'akiv. Okay, then we continue. Lapar, where you said it says in the pasuk. Now when you go through every word in that, the Braisa goes through every word in the pasuk. It says, "But also lapar kasha also lapar chatas." So it says lapar, and it says that what's this par you should do to this other par, which is what par yom kippurim, the par yom kippur. What exactly are you learning Yom Kippur from Par Helm Davish Tzibur or vice versa? Omar Amichka says, the Omar, he said, if you just look at Yom Kippur, I would have thought, I says, it's all there, you have to follow the rules. And what in the world are Yom Kippur learning from Par Helm Davish Tzibur? So I was like this. You have two kinds of avodas on Yom Kippur. You have the general avodas do every day, carbon tamid and carbon musa and all that. And we know the Kohen Gadol does all the activities, but what clothes does he wear when he does his normal activities? The golden, big days up, the golden clothes, the normal vestments. When he does the specific avodah Yom Kippur, he wears big levanim. He wears white clothes, big levanim. But in the avodah of Yom Kippur, there's two stages. Like in the big levanim, you have Oidish Hakadoshim, which is only once a year, and then you have the avodah you do in the Heichel, in the Mizbech. That you do other times also. There are other kabbanas you do throughout the year in the other thing you do in the Heichel. So I would have thought, says the Gemara here, I would have thought when it says Zois Chukas HaTorah, the unique things of unique should be unique. White clothing in the Kodesh HaKadoshim, which is Pamachas Bashanim. There, it's Ma'akiv if you don't. Zois Chukas HaTorah. Not only you have to do it, that for sure you have to do it, but even the Seder and Yonim, and we will learn the Machlekes and Yuma, the Seder and Yonim. But the Seder and Yonim, what comes first, what comes second, has to be exact. But when it comes to the Mizbeach, the Mizbeach in the Heichel, okay, you have to do every activities. But if you change the order between the Par and the Soyer, or the Soyer, Shalech and the Soyer and Nasa B'Fnim, if you change the order, or you're spraying which products you spray first, maybe it's not so bad. That's what I would have thought. That's why we need to limit from Par Helm Davish that no, that's Ma'akev. Says the Gemara. Rabbi Yehuda says, Kiksi v'chukad vorim anasi b'deloven b'fnim. Only those things done in Kodesh HaKadoshim. Shim heg dem ma'aseh l'chaveida. If you did one activity before the other activity, lo yasur leklum, because it says the chuk, and that's where you have to do the spraying and the Ketaitis, right? In the Kodesh HaKadoshim, two things he does inside the Kodesh HaKadoshim: the Ketaitis and the Hazois. If you change the order around, maybe that's where it's chukah. The chukah, they got to do it exactly. But things you do by the heichel, l'mashal, you have to spray the blood of the par. You have to spray the blood of the soil. What happens? You do differently. If you mix the two together, but if you do you're supposed to do it separately. Let's say, and you mix up the order, big deal. That's what you thought. Maybe it's good enough. And then I'll go a step further. Since the Seder on Yon Lamakiv, so Hazoy is, in other words, the word Chukah is not referring to the Seder. So maybe also the Hazoyas also is not Ma'akiv. He didn't know the Hazoyas, in that Heichel, the form of Tundus, or even the Zion. Maybe it's not Ma'akiv. The Seder is not Ma'akiv, neither that. Hazoy is not Ma'akiv. So therefore, Kamash Malon comes to tell you this is the Hekish, why you learn Yom Kippur from there, that the Hazoy is a Makiv. And if the Hazoy is a Makiv, then surely the Seder is Makiv. Everybody's Makiv. Maskiv, Lord, Papa, Rabba asked a question. How can you learn that Pshat like Rabbi Yehuda? We learn Ikuv from here. I'll show you a Braita that Rabbi Yehuda actually learns Ikuv from somewhere else, that everything is Makiv. And therefore you don't need this equation to Par Hel and Dava. What is that? Didn't we learn? It says in the pasuk, "V'chila mechaper esakadosh." It talks about the Parsha Achir Yom Kippur. It says, "V'chila mechaper esakadosh." You finish being mechaper the kodesh, and then it says, "And the oil moed, and the mizbech," and then you bring the other animal, the soyer hachai. Then you do the siyum shalech after you finished. Now, so that says Rabbi Yehud, Rabbi Kiva, im Kippur kila. If you did the kaparas part of it, you did the hazois part of it, okay. The l'chayil, it's extra. If you did the parts that are ma'akiv, like the hazois, the matan damim, for example, okay. It's side the matan sheva, side the matan dalid, and then you bring the simon even though you didn't yet throw down the rest of the blood down the yisoid and the outer mizbech, but you did all the activities that had to be done. That's ma'akiv in the inner mizbech. Good enough. And you bought him a shalech, even though you should have waited till the end. You didn't. Good enough. Why? Because he swaps the runs around, even though it's a mechaper.
At what point are we saying in Kippur?
So he's saying
completed the process.
The anything you have to do in the inner sanctum. Anything to do in the sign and the breakers and the matan sheva inside the matan arbi. You did all that. Even though Chatzchili should finish everything, but as long as he takes the word the chippa, puts in the front. The chippa, you did the kapara part, kila. It's as if you finished, and now you brought the Seder Mishalech, good enough. But if you did not do all those activities, then you threw some Shalech, no good, you got to start all over again. Maybe you had a Machlekes where you have to do a Hogay or whatever. David Abakiva. Why do you swap around the order? You make a new din. Read the passage where it says, Im Kila, you finished all your activities, including the leftover share Adam you threw down the side. You finished all of them, keep it. You like it. And that's a machlekes if you have to finish your side. So what does he clear from here? Rabbi Yehuda learns by avoiding and keeper. From where does he learn that it's ma'akev v'chila v'keeper? So what do you tell me? You have to learn a hekesh from Herem Dovah Tzibur that everything's ma'akev. You know from here. You know what you learn out Yom Kippur from Herem Dovah Tzibur? We learn out the din of es, and we learn badam ubetvilah. What's going on? We learn these dinim, two dinim here. We learn out the bedam betvilah and the word es betvilah. Regarding, it says betavl, it says you dab your finger. It's not written by Pad Helm Dovish Tzibur. It's actually, even though it's written there, but it's missing the badam. We learned that out from Parkaim Mashiach. What do we learn out from these two words? What din are we talking about here? First of all, you have a wart on your finger. Is that a chatzitza? By saying es is always considered secondary. It is what do you call it? S is always you don't have that?
I'm gonna put this in. I'll just.
Yeah, have it. Interesting. You know. Oh, me, yeah.
I never saw it before.
What else could it be? I don't know. Amin shebetz or no? Amish betz, which means a wart, like a wart, a growth. So you would have thought it's a chatitza, because it has S. Etzba, not on your finger, but that which is secondary to etzba, a growth on your etzba, that you eat, it's not a titza. And ba dam, it could have said dam or bid dam. Ba means a pre-existing dam. There should have been already blood. There should have been already blood in the keli before you put your finger in. Otherwise, there should have been the shear. If you put the blood in a number of kelim, you can do 7 hazois. Machlek is whether you need 7 kelim or 1 keli, enough blood for 7 hazois. But if you put a little bit of blood, and then you put in another cup, and then you each one less than the shear to do the hazois, and then you mix the 2 cups together, it's no good. It has to be bad dam, the pre-existing dam. These two dinim. So one is a kula, one is a chumrah. Sheyehei bad dam shear tefillah mikara. That's number 1. And what's v'tavel? The third din v'tavel. V'lay mistapik. You have enough blood. V'lay mistapik. Don't. V'lay mistapik. You have blood on the walls of the cup. Don't take your finger against the walls of the cup and fill it with blood. You got to dip your finger into immerse. So these are 3 dinim that we know by Parkei Mashiach. We move it over, or at least one of the dinim is only by Parkei Mashiach. We move them over to Par Helm Dovish, or we learn directly a par Yom Kippurim from Parkei Mashiach, because this pasuk covers all the parim. And why? So why you need badam? Why you need all of them? If you have tavel dipping in, does that already tell you everything? They would say dipping in immersive. I mean, I've got like a shit trillion because who cares how much blood? If it's enough for the first hazah, even though there's not enough for everything else, good enough. Because I'm on a badam, the pre-existing blood has to be there first before you dip your finger in. So just say badam. I'm in a film misapik. If you take the blood off the walls, good enough. Because I'm on a tavel, it has to immerse, has to be blood inside. Okay, then it says in the pasuk, you place the blood in this is like Kohen Mashiach. Akan be'ek toides hasamim lifnei Hashem. The mizbeach toides samim. Normally, why does it say toides samim? So we know we're lifnei Hashem, which we're talking about. No, another din. If you never, it's a brand new mizbeach, and the way you're supposed to initiate a mizbeach is by doing k'taydos. If you didn't do k'taydos on this mizbeach, and then all the Yidden, let's say, did an aveda, and you have to bring a pad helam dovash or tzibur or kohen mashiach, loy hayamaza, you couldn't spray it on the mizbeach until first it became a k'taydos asamim. Zayte gezach. Says the Gemara. Tanya Kavose, the Rapapa, we looked at Rapapa, who says that we learn. You know what the learning par Yom Kippur from Parkei Mashiach, the laws of Es and Badam and V'Taval. It says in the pasuk, it says in the Brayse as follows. But also kash, you should do to the par, right? This is par helm of the You should do to the par kasher also. Ma tam lepar. Then it's again lepar achatas. So what did this come to tell you this part? This is a different Bryce than we had before. L'rabbas par Yom Kippurim. To what? To include par Yom Kippurim. To what? L'chol masha amma be'inyan divrei Rebbe. Rebbe says we learn par Yom Kippurim, everything that it says here. In other words, not regarding equal. We maybe we learned that already from the parsha where it says over there all the laws on Yom Kippur. But where we learn the chil of Kippur and all that, where do we learn? What other dinner could it be? S and Badam and Trillah. That is not mentioned there by Yom Kippur. We learn that from there. That's what Rebbe says. So Rebbe holds more or less what we said before. However, comes along Rebbe Shmuel, I don't need it. And tomorrow's Gemara is going to be all understanding Rebbe Shmuel. Rebbe Shmuel says, I don't need a pasuk because Kal V'Chomer would tell me that Par Yom Kippur, surely you have to follow all the dinim. What's going on here? Rebbe Shmuel, Kal V'Chomer, have a Kal V'Chomer. I don't need to learn Par Yom Kippurim and bring it here. That what Kal V'Chomer would tell me that whatever applies to Par Helen Davash Tzibur would apply to Par Yom Kippurim. What's a Kal V'Chomer? As follows. Ma b'malkim madach in a place shlo hushvik carbon. You bring different animals for the carbon. Yet hishvu ma'isel and ma'isem. And the Gemara will explain in the later Gemara what are you talking about? Which carbon animals are different, but yet the ma'isem activities like the spraying on the pareiches or the inner mizbeach, they have the same dinim inner mizbeach 4 times around the 4 corners. Over there, different animals, and yet the dinim are exactly the same. Is surely makom shehish carbon. Surely a place we have exactly the same carbon. A par, they're both a bull. A par Yom Kippur and a par Mashiach is ein odin shehish ma'isel. Then surely, or a par helm dovish they're all a par. Since if the same animal, surely the dinim are exactly the same. I don't need a pasuk for it. So therefore, automatically, I will know that the dinim of Es, Adam, and Tefillah are included. What's the story? So what do I need lepar for? To teach me regarding Yom Kippur. What in the world can Yom Kippur learn that you couldn't learn from a Kal V'Chomer? The word lepar is going back to Par Helen Dovish Tzibur, which is a little hard to understand because the whole parsha is talking about Par Helen Dovish Tzibur. So why would you suddenly throw in that word lepar to confuse us? Lepar Helen Dovish Tzibur. And the Gemara will talk about that. Okay, that's so lepar. The first lepar is par held over Sibur, and then it says again lepar, and it says also lapar kasha also lepar chatas. What's the second lepar coming? Okay, the first one is par held over Sibur. What is the second part? Lepar. Lepar. The second part is ze par koyim Mashiach. The second part is par koyim Mashiach. And that what is it? We learned before that Par Koyin Mashiach. How do you know the Ikuva? We learn that from Par Helm Dovish Tzibur because it says also it says twice also that La'akiv. So because La'akiv, so here also it's Ma'akiv. That what? That you know that Par Koyin Mashiach as well. If you don't do all the activity, if you don't say but the Evid one matan is good enough. It's Ma'akiv. So Par Koyin Mashiach learned something from Par Helm Dovish Tzibur. What the first Lepar means, what you're saying is also referring to Par Helm Dovish Tzibur is hard to understand. What you're learning from itself. I mean, that's what anyhow. Oh man, let's and Rabbi Shmuel. That's when we go through the Gemara the next days. Rabbi Shmuel. Oh man, you said the ma b'makal. Let's first understand your first Kal V'Chomer. You said in a place shalahush carbon where the animals are different and yet the dinim are the same. What are you talking about? Which kabbanis? What are you talking about? Elam, are we talking about par? Let's say for example, remember we're talking about par Yom Kippur, and the soyer Yom Kippur. You can put him. Oh, here you have 2 animals. One is a goat. And one is a par, and yet they both have activity. You have to spray it on the inner bear 4 times. You have to do 7 sprayings. Mamish the same avodas, and yet different animals, but the same avodas. Then surely 2 karbanim of the same animal. Surely the avodas should be the same. That's what is that the Kal V'Chomer? Even a par gepurim is saying gepurim equal mifra. I can say there's a difference. Why? You know why over there everything is important because they're mamish the same. It's not just the same animal. There's another thing that they have in common. They're both brought inside in the Beis Hamikdash. No, not kachikachu, but you bring them both into the Heichel. Yeah. Sorry, you bring take it back. You bring kachikachu as well. You spray in front of the Arden. So it's exactly the same. Maybe that's why. So what's the Kal V'Chomer? Ella, I'll tell you what the Kal V'Chomer is. You have 2 karbanos, 2 different animals. Par helim dover shel tzibur. Take for example the par helim. Okay, they forgot the din of Aveda. They did bring a par, and then we had the din is by Avodah Zarah. You bring 2 animals, but the seidi bring an oila, and you bring this chatas is a goat. Here the chatas is a bull, and there the chatas is a goat. So it's different animals, and yet the dinim are exactly the same. And how do we know that? From the word hachatos, we learn out. Remember, we compare all the dinim by Avodah Zarah to this. Equal mifkin ask, Malahanoch, you know why these 2 they have something else in common. Mechapin ala vedis mitzvahs yudua. you know exactly what the Aveda is. The Bezin paskin wrong by Averizah, paskin Aveda, you know, and then they realize I made a mistake. We know exactly what we're, so therefore, the mama is the same. It's not just the animal, even though the animals are different, they have something in common, the same thing. Ela par, the par of Kohen of Yom Kippur is for all Avedas. Those you know about and those you don't know about. Yeah. Right? And we said before, the Par Yom Kippur is Makaper, you had no Yedi in the beginning, but you had Yedi in the end by Tumah. You walked in the base of me, you didn't know you were tummy, but you found out after, you realized you were tummy. So there's partial not knowing. So it's a different category of Avedis. That's what how do you know that Par Yom Kippur automatically, that surely everything that applies to Par Helam Dovish applies there. So the Gemara Ella Pad Helen Dover shall Tibur and the Soyish and Kippurim. Take the Pad Helen Dover shall Tibur, it's a bull. The goat and Kippur, they're two different cup animals, and the soya and the two different Avedas altogether that they're covering. Pad Helen Tibur, you know exactly what you're doing. The Soyish and Kippurim, you don't know what you're doing, and you have a Hachikamer. And then you don't know about Tumah one way before or after. And Hachikamer, and this is what he's saying here. This is the Kavachimer. Moksel who should carbon the carbon, they're not the same animal. The high power, the high soil, and who should maisim, lemaisim, they do the same activity. That what you need matanas on the Mizbeach is the kosher boy at least. True, true that not the pad helm doves you don't spray inside the kosher kedoshim. But where in those things that in the areas that they have in common, much in the heichel, it's exactly the same activities. What's in that which is written by them. They're exactly the same. So Makom Shahushva carbon where the carbonas are the same animal, the part of Yom Kippur and the part of Helam Dovish are the same animal, the high part is and surely Shahushva Maisa they should have the same activities. And which activities are we learning? It's all written already by Par Yom Kippurim. We are learning the additional activities of Es Badam and V'tava. Says the Gemara, but also like Par Kippurim, Es and Badam of V'tfilah. And you learn that out from where? Where do you learn that from? It's not written with footage by Pad Helam Dovish. Remember, Pad Helam Dovish Gufa you had to learn from Par Kaim Mashiach. You learn it out from Par Kaim Mashiach because in that very pasuk where it says well us and all that, one of the word Pad is referring to Par Kaim Mashiach. So it's, in that pasuk, it's all included. So therefore, you can learn within that pasuk from one to the other. You learn Par Yom Kippur, which is the first Par, to the second Par, which is the first Par Kaim Mashiach, and you say, well, just like Par Kaim Mashiach, you have Es Ba'adam of Tefillah, so too here by Par Yom Kippur as well. Also like Par Yom Kippur, Es Ba'adam Tefillah Par Kaim Mashiach. So you want to oscillate Yom Kippurim. Then you say that we learn out the soyed of Yom Kippurim, and you learn out how do you know that Seir Yom Kippurim also you have the din of Es and Badam with Tefillah? How do you know that the Seir Yom Kippurim has that? Because where does it say Es Badam Tefillah? It's a Par Koyim Mashiach, and that pasuk that you're learning the Par is only the Par because have Hushru Kabban is the same animal. So following Mishmol's logic, there's no pasuk for it. It's all logic. No, so how do you know that the soil of Yom Kippurim, which is not part of the Kavachayim, because it's like a different animal as well? How do you know there we have the same rule applies? Es Badam Tefillah. Says the Gemara. The Kavachayim is from the goat of Avodas Kechavim. It's the same animal. And Seed Avodas Kechavim we learn out from Pad Helm Dovish Tzibur. And once you know by Seir Avodah Kechavim, you have the din of Es Badam and Tefillah. Now you say, well, you have the same carbon. Seir Yom Kippur is Hushva carbon I saying. So therefore, we can learn one from another. Says the Gemara, how does it work? How do you know Gufa that Seir Avodah Zorah? You have these dinim of Es from a hekesh from the Pad Helm Dovish Tzibur. And now you want to learn a Kavachayim from that. So surely they should apply Seir Yom Kippurim. And that's a Mochamer and so on. Papa says, yes, this Tana holds. So Tana Bishmal, Dover, Halamed, Behekich, Chizim, Lama, Kavachayim. You can do that. I think tomorrow's we'll continue analyzing the Raisa, all these dinners, what you learn.